At 37 years old, Jackson Jax Carter was a man who understood the architecture of a life. He was a registered nurse at the Kaiser Permanente Los Angeles Medical Center on Sunset Boulevard, a demanding job with 12-hour shifts that paid him a solid, dependable $96,000 a year. It was a salary built on his own two hands, on his mind's ability to recall the precise dosage of a beta blocker, on the steady calmness he could project in a room where a heart monitor was screaming its frantic rhythm. His life was built on things he could measure, things he could trust: the predictable rise and fall of a patient's chest, the guaranteed contribution to his Kaiser pension, the deed to a modest Silver Lake bungalow he had bought with his own savings 6 years before he ever met his wife. The devastating situation arrived not with a bang, but with a quiet, carefully articulated sentence delivered at 9:17 p.m. on a Friday night. The air in their living room was thick with the scent of the $80 diptyque baize candle Nova had lit. Rain slicked the windows, a gentle, percussive rhythm against the glass of the home he loved. Jax had just finished cleaning the kitchen after a dinner he'd cooked: pan-seared salmon with a lemon dill sauce, a recipe he'd perfected. Nova was scrolling through her phone, her thumb a blur across the illuminated screen of her $1,200 iPhone 14 Pro. The television, a $3,500 Samsung frame that displayed a Monet painting when not in use, was silent. He sat down on the gray West Elm sofa, a piece that had cost him $2,800, feeling the familiar fatigue of a long week settle into his bones. He reached for her hand, a simple gesture of connection. She didn't pull away, not exactly, but her hand remained limp in his, her attention still captive to the glowing rectangle. After a moment, she sighed, a sound of profound and weary boredom. She finally locked the phone and placed it face down on the polished oak coffee table between them. "What's wrong?" Jax asked, his voice low. Nova looked around the room, her gaze sweeping over the shelves of books he'd curated, the framed photographs of their travels, trips he had meticulously planned and paid for. Her eyes, the color of warm honey, held no warmth at all. They were assessing, cataloging, judging. "It's just this," she said, gesturing vaguely at the space between them, at the whole comfortable, stable life he had so carefully constructed. "Don't you ever feel like we're not really a husband and wife anymore?" She paused, searching for the right words, the ones that would cut the deepest. "We're more like roommates now." The sentence hung in the air, more potent than the expensive candle, instantly extinguishing every ounce of warmth in the room. Roommates. The word landed in Jax's mind not like a spark, but like a block of dry ice, cold, sharp, and utterly clarifying. He felt the blood in his veins slow, the emotional temperature of his world dropping by 20 degrees. He looked at his wife, at her beautiful, discontented face, and for the first time, he didn't see the woman he loved. He saw a tenant with an overdue balance. He had no idea how right she was, and no idea how much that simple observation was about to cost her. What do you do when the person you've built your world for tells you they're just a guest in it? Many people would argue or plead or demand an explanation, but Jax was a man of action, not argument, and he was about to take his wife very, very literally. Stay tuned, because this is the story of how a single sentence dismantled a marriage and revealed the true meaning of partnership. The facade of their life had been beautiful, expensive, and almost entirely underwritten by Jax. He remembered the week they met, a whirlwind of LA cliches. She was a freelance graphic designer then, working out of a noisy coffee shop in Echo Park, her laptop covered in cool stickers, her bank account perpetually hovering near zero. He was a man with a plan, a house, and a future. He was captivated by her spirit, her creativity, what he thought was a shared vision for a life filled with beauty. He hadn't realized she was only interested in the beauty, not the work it took to create and sustain it. Their first big trip together was to Maui, a 5-day escape that cost him just over $4,000 when all was said and done. He'd used his saved-up vacation days and a chunk of his annual bonus. They stayed at a resort where the cheapest cocktail was $18. Nova posted dozens of photos to her Instagram, her feet in the white sand, the hibiscus flower tucked behind her ear, the two of them silhouetted against a spectacular sunset. The caption read, "Living the Dream." Jax, standing just out of frame, had paid for the dream with his Visa Sapphire Reserve card. When they got married a year later, it was a small ceremony at the Wayfarers Chapel in Rancho Palos Verdes, a stunning glass church overlooking the ocean. The venue rental alone was $3,800. Nova wanted a specific photographer, one whose portfolio was full of ethereal, sun-drenched images. The photographer's fee was $7,500 for the day. Her dress, a delicate lace creation from a boutique on Montana Avenue, was $5,200. Jax wore a perfectly tailored navy suit from Suit Supply that cost him $699. He paid for it all. He didn't mind. He was building a life, he told himself. This is what you do. You build. After the wedding, she moved into his 1,200-square-foot Silver Lake bungalow. It was his sanctuary, a place he'd bought when he was 31, after years of frugal living and saving every spare dollar from his nursing shifts. The down payment, a full 20% to avoid mortgage insurance, had been $110,000. He had painted the walls himself, planted a lemon tree in the small backyard, and replaced the old linoleum floors with warm, engineered hardwood. Nova arrived with her suitcases and a vision. The bungalow, she declared, needed a refresh. His sturdy, comfortable crate and barrel furniture was dated. His collection of framed concert posters from his college days was juvenile. So began the slow, expensive process of transforming Jax's home into Nova's showroom. Out went his $1,500 leather armchair, replaced by a sleek, uncomfortable Scandinavian-looking piece that cost $2,200. Out went his solid oak dining table where he'd shared countless meals with friends, replaced by a glass-top table from Restoration Hardware that cost $3,000 and showed every single fingerprint. She insisted on a new rug for the living room, a vintage-style piece that cost $1,800. She needed new curtains, new light fixtures, new throw pillows that seemed to cost $50 each. Jax paid. He transferred money from his personal savings account into their joint checking account, and the funds would vanish within days, spent at high-end decor shops and online boutiques. Her career had also evolved. The freelance graphic design work, which had never been particularly lucrative, dried up. She decided she wanted to be a social media manager for luxury lifestyle brands. It sounded impressive. It involved a lot of long lunches at places like the Ivy and Saucony's, meetings she would detail for him later, talking about brand synergy and audience engagement. Her starting salary at a boutique PR firm was a respectable $70,000, but her lifestyle seemed benchmarked against the clients she served, not the paycheck she earned. Jax would come home from a grueling shift, his feet aching in his $150 Red Wing boots, the faint scent of antiseptic still clinging to his scrubs, and find packages on the porch. A box from Net-a-Porter containing a $2,400 Burberry trench coat, a delivery from Sephora with $400 worth of creams and serums. He would look at the receipts, at the sheer volume of consumption, and a quiet unease would begin to grow in his gut. He tried to talk to her about it once gently. It was a Sunday morning, a few months before the roommates comment. He was at the dining table, paying their bills online. He had his laptop open, a spreadsheet he used to track their finances. The numbers weren't adding up. "Hey, Nova," he'd started, his tone mild. I was looking at our spending for last month. We're in the red by about 3 grand. She was doing her makeup at a vanity table she'd had installed in their bedroom, a $200 piece she'd found on First Dibs. She was surrounded by a small army of brushes, palettes, and jars. What does that even mean? In the red, she asked, not turning around, carefully applying a line of $45 Chanel eyeliner. It means we spent $3,000 more than we brought in, Jax explained. Your salary goes into the joint account, and my salary covers the mortgage and utilities from my personal account. Then I transfer the rest to the joint account for everything else. But it's not enough. Well, maybe you should transfer more, she said simply, as if the solution were obvious. Or, Jax countered, still gently, maybe we could cut back a little? We spent almost $2,000 on restaurants and takeout last month, and another $1,500 on, well, I'm not sure what. Clothes and things. She finally turned around, the eyeliner brush held in her hand like a weapon. Her face was a mask of indignation. Are you serious? You want me to cut back? Jax, my job requires me to look a certain way, to go to certain places. It's an investment in my career. You can't expect me to show up to a client meeting in clothes from Target. Do you see what my boss wears? She wears the Row. That's an $8,000 coat. I'm not asking you to wear Target, he said, his voice tight. I'm just asking for a budget, for us to be a team. It feels like you're criticizing me, she said, her voice turning sharp. It feels like you're trying to control me. I thought you were proud of me, of what I'm building. The conversation ended there, as it always did. Any talk of money was twisted into an attack on her ambition, her identity. He was cast as the provincial bean counter, clipping coupons, while she was trying to conquer the world. So he stopped trying. He picked up extra shifts at the hospital. He worked overtime on holidays. He funneled more of his income into the joint account, a silent subsidy for a lifestyle he didn't want and an attitude he was beginning to despise. The domestic normalcy was a carefully curated stage play, and he was the beleaguered, invisible stagehand, making sure all the props were in place. The cruelty wasn't a sudden storm. It was a slow, creeping frost. It was in the accumulation of small moments, little dismissals that, over time, eroded the very foundation of their marriage. The escalating betrayal was a masterclass in quiet contempt, and Jax had a front row seat. It had started, he realized in retrospect, with her friends. Nova's circle was composed of women who seemed to be in a silent, ferocious competition with one another. They were all in PR, marketing, or some vague form of consulting. They measured success in follower counts, designer labels, and the exclusivity of the restaurants they could get into. Jax, with his practical job and his deep brown skin luminous under the fluorescent lights of a hospital, was an anomaly, a curiosity they couldn't quite place. About 6 months ago, Nova had insisted they host a dinner party, not a casual backyard barbecue, which Jax loved, but a formal, catered affair. The catering alone cost $1,500 for 6 people. Nova's friends arrived like a flock of expensive, exotic birds, all sharp angles and flashing logos. A Chanel flat bag here, $8,800. A pair of Christian Louboutin heels there, $795. Jax, dressed in his best jeans and a crisp button-down shirt, tried to engage. He asked one of them, a woman named Chloe, who worked for a celebrity skincare line, about her job. Oh, it's just endless content creation, Chloe had sighed, swirling a glass of $80 a bottle Sancerre that Jax had purchased. It's exhausting trying to make a moisturizer seem revolutionary every single day. Later, Jax found himself cornered in the kitchen by another friend, a woman named Becca. It's so amazing what you do, she said, her tone dripping with a condescension so thick he could almost taste it. Like, with the sick people and everything. That must be so rewarding. I could never. The smells, you know? Jax just smiled. A tight, practiced smile. It has its moments. But the real sting came when he overheard Nova talking to Chloe by the new wine fridge, 2500 he'd installed for her. He was coming back inside from the patio to grab more napkins. They didn't see him. He's just so earnest, Chloe was saying, gesturing with her wine glass toward the living room where Jax had been moments before. I know, Nova had replied, her voice a conspiratorial whisper, but he's a good man, and he's stable. My mother always said to find a stable man. She took a sip of her wine. Honestly, his job is perfect. He makes decent money, and he's too busy saving lives to notice how much my Hermes habit is costing him. They both laughed, a light tinkling sound that made Jax's stomach clench. He retreated back to the patio, his heart pounding a sick, heavy rhythm against his ribs. She had presented him to her friends not as a partner, but as a resource, a stable, useful thing, like a well-funded trust or a reliable automobile. The financial disrespect was constant. A few months after the dinner party, her 2018 Honda Civic, a car he had paid the $3,000 down payment for, and whose $350 monthly notes he had covered for 2 years until it was paid off, was suddenly not good enough. I need a new car, Jax, she announced one Tuesday evening. What's wrong with the Honda? It's reliable. It's paid off, he said reasonably. It's a Honda, Jax, she said, as if that explained everything. I'm pulling up to valet at the Chateau Marmont for a client meeting next to Bentleys and Teslas. And I pull up in a Civic. It's not a good look. It undermines my authority. What kind of car are you thinking? He asked, a sense of dread pooling in his stomach. I was looking at the Audi Q5, she said, her eyes bright with desire. The new one. It's so sleek. We could get it in white. Jax did a quick search on his phone. The starting price for a new Audi Q5 was $55,000. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and felt a profound sense of disconnect. He spent his days fighting for people's lives, holding the hands of frightened families, dealing with the raw, messy, beautiful reality of human existence. And she was worried about the brand of car she took to valet. Nova, we can't afford a $55,000 car, he said flatly. What do you mean we can't afford it? You can afford it. You have all that money in your savings. That's my emergency fund, Nova. It's for if the roof collapses or if one of us gets sick. Well, this is an emergency, she'd shot back, her voice rising. It's a career emergency. The argument went nowhere. He refused to drain his savings for a status symbol, and she treated his refusal as a personal betrayal, a sign that he didn't support her dreams. She gave him the silent treatment for 3 days, a cold and heavy presence in their small house, until he finally broke down and agreed to discuss it later, a euphemism for her eventually getting her way. They had no idea what was coming. The emotional distance grew, becoming a physical chasm between them. He worked long hours, and when he came home, she was often out at a networking event. When they were home together, she was glued to her phone, her inner life outsourced to a stream of images and updates that had nothing to do with him. One night, about a month before the end, he came to bed exhausted. The shift had been brutal. A multi-car pileup on the 101 freeway had flooded the ER. He had seen things that night he would have to work hard to forget. He slipped under the covers of their shared bed, the sheets cool against his skin. The bed itself, a king-sized Stearns & Foster mattress with a custom upholstered frame, had been her idea. Another $6,000 expense. She was propped up against the pillows, the blue light of her phone illuminating her face. She was scrolling through the Cartier website. He could see the tiny glittering images of bracelets and rings. He just wanted to feel close to her. He reached out and laid his hand on her arm. She flinched. It was a small, almost imperceptible movement, but it felt like a physical blow. She pulled her arm away without taking her eyes off the screen. "Don't," she said, her voice distant. "You're sticky. Sticky." He had probably not washed his hands thoroughly enough after his last patient, after scrubbing down the trauma bay. The word, so casual, so dismissive, landed with brutal force. He was no longer her husband, her partner. He was an inconvenience, a contaminant. He lay there in the darkness, his hand still warm from where it had briefly touched her, and felt a loneliness so profound it was like a physical ache in his chest. All these moments, these 1,000 tiny cuts, led to that Friday night, when she looked at him across the expensive coffee table in the house he paid for and delivered the line that would change everything. "We're more like roommates now." He sat there in the sudden, ringing silence, the Monet on the television screen looking on impassively. He felt the disparate pieces of the last few years click into place. The dismissive comments, the financial demands, the physical withdrawal. It wasn't a phase. It wasn't a rough patch. It was a verdict. She had already left the marriage. She was just waiting for him to start paying her alimony. And in that cold, clear, devastating moment of discovery, Jackson Carter decided he would not be paying. He would be billing. The weekend after Nova's declaration was a masterclass in strategic restraint. Jax woke up on Saturday morning at 6:15 a.m., the internal clock of a career nurse overriding any desire to sleep in. For a moment, everything was normal. The gray morning light filtered through the blinds of their bedroom. Nova was still asleep, a still form under the $600 parachute linen duvet cover. Then the memory of her words from the night before settled over him, cold and heavy as a lead blanket. "We're more like roommates now." Instead of anger, he felt a strange, chilling calm. The emotional part of his brain, the part that had loved this woman, that had made excuses for her, that had worked overtime to fund her whims, seemed to have been switched off. In its place, his analytical nurse's mind took over. He was no longer a husband. He was a triage specialist assessing a critical situation. First, assess the damage. Second, stop the bleeding. Third, formulate a treatment plan. He slipped out of bed and went to the kitchen. He made coffee using the Technivorm Maca-Master coffee maker, a $350 machine she had insisted they needed. As the rich aroma filled the air, he sat at the glass dining table and opened his laptop, a 2019 MacBook Pro that felt ancient next to her newer model. He created a new folder on his desktop. He named it Project Roommate. The first lie, or rather the first act of feigned normalcy, came when Nova finally emerged from the bedroom around 10:30 a.m. She was wearing a silk pajama set that probably cost more than his work boots. "Morning," she said, her voice still husky with sleep. She avoided his eyes, busying herself with pouring a mug of the coffee he had made. "Morning," Jax replied, his tone perfectly even. He didn't look up from his laptop, where he was ostensibly reading the news. In reality, he was logged into his bank's website, downloading 2 years' worth of statements from every account, his personal checking, his high-yield savings, and their joint checking account. Each file was a breadcrumb trail of their financial history. "Could you do me a huge favor?" she asked, adding a splash of oat milk to her coffee. "I need to pick up my dress from the dry cleaners on Larchmont, but I have a brunch thing in an hour. Could you grab it for me?" "Of course," he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Here he was, being treated as her personal assistant, the day after she had demoted him from husband to roommate. It was perfect. It was evidence. An hour later, he stood in the boutique dry cleaner's shop on Larchmont Boulevard. The air smelled of chemicals and steamed fabric. "Picking up for Nova Carter," he told the woman at the counter. She returned with a dress swathed in protective plastic. It was a floral, flowing thing he recognized from a wedding they had attended last summer. "That'll be $87?" the woman said. $87. To clean a single dress she had worn once. He paid with his debit card, the one linked to their joint account. He took the receipt. He walked back to his 2012 Toyota Camry with 187,000 miles on it, got in, and took a photo of the receipt with his phone. He saved it to the Project Roommate folder. He was no longer just picking up dry cleaning. He was gathering data points. On Sunday, the performance continued. Nova suggested they do something. A vague proposal that usually meant spending money. "Let's go to the Melrose Trading Post," she said. "It'll be fun, like we used to." He agreed. They walked through the crowded market, a sea of vintage clothes, artisanal crafts, and LA hopefuls. She pointed out a distressed denim jacket she liked, $150. She bought a set of handmade ceramic mugs, $80. She insisted they get gourmet ice pops, $7 each. Jax paid for everything using the joint account, a quiet observer of his own financial hemorrhaging. He wasn't her husband on a Sunday stroll. He was a case manager documenting a client's spending habits. That evening was the centerpiece of his playing dumb strategy. They ordered takeout from a Thai restaurant she loved, a meal that came to $94 with delivery fees and tip. They sat on the expensive gray sofa to watch a movie on Netflix. She chose the movie, a critically acclaimed indie film he knew she would find boring. As the opening credits rolled, he opened his laptop again. "Just need to check some work emails," he murmured, a plausible excuse for a nurse who was often on call. She just grunted in response, her attention already divided between the movie and her phone. He opened a new Excel spreadsheet. He named it Household Expenses FY 23-24. He began to populate it, using the bank statements he'd downloaded and the receipts he'd been mentally collecting. He was meticulous. Every line item was a testament to the one-sided nature of their financial life. Mortgage, $2,800, paid from his personal account for his premarital property. Property tax, $7,200 annually or $600 per month. Homeowners, insurance, $200 annually or $100 per month. Utilities, DWP, water and power, average of $450 per month. Gas, SoCalGas, average of $80 per month. Internet cable, Spectrum, $220 per month for the premium package she wanted. Groceries, a mix of Erewhon, Trader Joe's, and Vons, average of $1,200 per month. Subscriptions, Netflix, $22.99, Hulu, $17.99, Max, $15.99, Spotify Family, $16.99, The New York Times, $17.90, her Pilates membership, $150, total, $240.96 car insurance, his Camry and her Civic, $180 per month. He kept going, adding categories for takeout, home goods, entertainment. The numbers climbed, painting a stark, undeniable picture. He excluded her personal spending, the clothes, the makeup, the lunches, for now. This was just the cost of running the household, the cost of being roommates. He created a final column. He labeled it Nova 50% share. Then, with the cold precision of a surgeon, he began to divide every shared expense by 2. The monthly total of her half came to a staggering figure. He stared at the number on the screen. It felt like a weapon. He saved the file to the Project Roommate folder. He glanced over at her. She was fast asleep, her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle, her phone fallen from her hand onto the cushion beside her. The movie played on, unseen. She hadn't even made it 30 minutes. She was a tenant who had fallen asleep in the common area. And rent, he thought with a grim, newfound clarity, was due. Monday dawned cool and overcast, the sky a flat gray canvas over Los Angeles. Jax had the day off, a rare weekday reprieve he had scheduled weeks ago for a dentist appointment. He had canceled the appointment on Saturday. He had a more important consultation to attend. At 7 a.m., Nova's alarm chimed, a gentle, new age melody that grated on Jax's nerves. She hit snooze twice before finally rolling out of bed. Jax was already up, dressed in jeans and a plain black t-shirt, sipping coffee at the kitchen table. He watched her go through her morning ritual, a flurry of activity in the bathroom that involved at least 10 different expensive products, followed by a frantic search for the right outfit. She settled on a pair of wide-leg trousers and a silk blouse that together probably cost more than his monthly car payment would have, if his car wasn't a decade old and fully paid for. As she grabbed her purse, a $3,500 YSL tote, she paused by the door. "I'm heading out. Big meeting today," she said, applying a slick of lip gloss without a mirror. She leaned in to give him a kiss, but it was a miss, a puff of air that landed somewhere near his ear. Then, with a careless, chilling echo of her Friday night pronouncement, she added, "Have a good day, Rumi." She smiled, a quick, bright flash of teeth, as if she had just made a clever joke. Jax didn't react. He just watched her walk out the door, the sound of her heels clicking on the hardwood floor a final, sharp punctuation mark. Rumi. She had said it again. A joke to her, a confirmation to him. He waited until he heard her Honda Civic start up and pull away from the curb. Then he went to his laptop, opened the Project Roommate folder, and printed 2 copies of everything: the spreadsheet of expenses, the bank statements with highlighted transactions, the deed to the house clearly dated May 2017, and his most recent Kaiser Permanente pension statement showing a vested balance of over $250,000. He organized the documents neatly into a black binder he bought from Staples for $12.99. At 9 a.m. sharp, Jax was not in a dentist's chair but on the 34th floor of a glass tower in Century City. The reception area of Okoro and Associates was quiet and intimidatingly elegant. Soft jazz played from invisible speakers. The view stretched all the way to the Pacific Ocean. He was there to see Adana Okoro, a name he'd gotten from a senior charge nurse at work who had gone through a contentious divorce herself. "She's expensive, but she's a shark," the nurse had told him. "A very calm, very well-dressed shark." Ms. Okoro was a tall, striking black woman in her late 40s. She wore an impeccably tailored navy blue suit that he guessed cost at least $4,000. Her hair was styled in elegant, tight coils, and she wore no-nonsense glasses that framed intelligent, perceptive eyes. She greeted him not with a handshake, but with a slight nod toward the chair opposite her massive mahogany desk. Her office was a fortress of confidence. "Mr. Carter," she began, her voice smooth and deep. "Your email was brief. It said you needed to discuss a domestic partnership matter." "Yes," Jax said. He placed the black binder on the polished surface of her desk and pushed it toward her. "My wife and I have been married for 3 years. On Friday, she informed me that she now considers us to be roommates. I've come to agree with her assessment. This binder contains the relevant financial documents for what I'm calling our roommate trial period." A flicker of something, surprise, amusement, crossed Ms. Okoro's face, but it was gone in an instant. She opened the binder. For the next 20 minutes, the only sound in the room was the soft rustle of paper as she turned each page. She scanned the deed, the pension statement, the meticulously organized expense spreadsheet. She paused on the final page, where he had calculated Nova's 50% share. Finally, she closed the binder and looked at him over the top of her glasses. "Mr. Carter," she said, and for the first time there was a hint of a smile on her lips. "You have done 90% of my paralegal's job for her. This is remarkably thorough." "I'm a nurse," Jax said simply. "I'm good with charts." "So I see," she said. "You understand that in California, assets acquired during the marriage are typically considered community property, subject to a 50-50 split." "I do," Jax said. "And debts." "Indeed. However, your premarital assets, namely, This Silver Lake property and your vested pension are your sole and separate property, provided you haven't commingled them. The mortgage has always been paid from my personal account, which was established before the marriage. The deed has never been amended to include her name, Jack stated, reciting the facts he had stayed up half the night confirming. Excellent, Ms. Okoro said. She leaned back in her chair. So, what is your desired outcome, Mr. Carter? You want to formalize this roommate arrangement? I want to see what happens when the subsidies end, Jack said, his voice cold and steady. I want to present her with a bill for her half of our shared life, a life she takes for granted. I want to see if she can afford it. And if she cannot, Ms. Okoro pressed, her eyes fixed on his. Then I want to file for divorce, Jack said without hesitation. On the grounds of irreconcilable differences, I believe her inability to function as an equal partner will prove that quite sufficiently. Ms. Okoro nodded slowly, a look of profound respect dawning on her face. This is a novel approach, Mr. Carter. Most clients come in here shouting, crying, throwing things. You've come in with a ledger. I appreciate that. She outlined her strategy. They would let him proceed with his plan. Every text, every email, every Venmo request would be a piece of evidence. It would establish a pattern of behavior. It would demonstrate Nova's financial dependence and her unwillingness to contribute fairly, making any future claims for significant spousal support much harder to justify. My retainer is $10,000, she said, her tone all business. My hourly rate is $850. If this proceeds to a full dissolution, the total cost could be upwards of $20,000, depending on how much she decides to fight. Jax didn't flinch. That's acceptable. He took out his phone, opened his banking app, and initiated a Zelle transfer for $10,000 from his personal savings account. The emergency fund he had told Nova was for a collapsing roof. This, he thought, qualified. The funds have been transferred, he said, showing her the confirmation screen. Ms. Okoro raised an eyebrow, impressed. Very well. You are now a client of this firm. Proceed with your experiment. Document everything. Send it to my assistant, Clara. And Mr. Carter? Yes. Do not, under any circumstances, answer a phone call from your wife. Let it go to voicemail. Voicemails are admissible. Conversations are hearsay. From now on, we communicate in writing. Is that understood? Perfectly, Jack said. He felt a weight lift from his shoulders, replaced by a steely resolve. He had a plan. He had a team. The strategic planning was complete. Now it was time for the strike. The strike began not with a raised voice or a slammed door, but with a quiet tap on a screen. On Monday at 1:07 p.m., sitting at his glass dining table, Jax opened the Venmo app on his phone. The interface was bright and cheerful, a scroll of his friends paying each other for brunch and concert tickets. His own transaction would be decidedly less friendly. He tapped the blue Pay or Request button. He typed Nova Carter into the recipient field. He entered the amount, $2,847.50. This was the number he had calculated on his spreadsheet, the sum of her 50% share of the mortgage, utilities, insurance, internet, and subscriptions for the upcoming month. It was a cold, hard, and utterly fair number. In the What's It For memo line, he typed with deliberate precision, November 2023 shared expenses, 50% share, per our roommate agreement. He didn't add a single emoji. He reviewed the request one last time, his heart beating a steady, calm rhythm. He felt no anger, no sadness, only a sense of profound, surgical clarity. He tapped the request button. The request was sent, a digital missile launched into the unsuspecting calm of his wife's afternoon. But that was only the first volley. The strike was a coordinated action designed to dismantle the invisible financial scaffolding that supported Nova's life. Next, he logged into his American Express account online. He navigated to the account services page. He saw Nova's name listed under authorized users, a privilege he had granted her shortly after they were married. It was this card, his card, that she used for her daily coffees, her expensive lunches, her spontaneous shopping trips. Its balance was paid in full every month from his bank account. With 3 clicks, he selected her name and clicked Remove User. A pop-up asked, "Are you sure you want to remove Nova Carter from your account? Her card will be deactivated immediately." He clicked Confirm. He moved on to the utility companies. He called the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. After navigating a 10-minute phone tree, he spoke to a representative. "Hi, I need to make a change to my account," he said calmly. "I need to remove a resident from the household. Her name is Nova Carter." He did the same with SoCalGas and Spectrum Cable. It was a simple, administrative task, but it felt monumental. He was methodically erasing her from the infrastructure of their life. Finally, he changed the passwords. Netflix, Hulu, Max, Spotify. He created new, complex passwords and saved them in a secure note on his phone. The digital keys to their shared entertainment kingdom were now his alone. The entire operation took less than an hour. He felt a grim satisfaction. He had set the board. Now he just had to wait for her to realize she was in checkmate. Tuesday passed in a blanket of silence. The Venmo request sat in his feed, marked as pending. Nova did not text. She did not call. Jax went to work for a long 12-hour shift at Kaiser Sunset. The ER was a controlled chaos of beeping monitors, urgent voices, and human bodies in various states of distress. Jax moved through it all with a focused calm that his colleagues had come to admire. At 3:42 p.m., he was helping to stabilize a construction worker who had fallen from a ladder. The man was scared, in pain, his arm bent at an unnatural angle. Jax spoke to him in a low, steady voice, explaining everything he was doing, assuring him that they would take care of him. In that moment, holding a stranger's hand, offering competence and compassion, Jax felt more connected and purposeful than he had in years of his own marriage. He was a healer. He was good at his job. He was a man of substance. The thought was so clear and powerful, it almost took his breath away. He got home late, long after midnight. The house was dark. A single glass, stained with red wine, sat on the coffee table. He went to bed without checking his phone. Wednesday was the day the world broke. The first tremor hit at 9:03 a.m. Jax was drinking his coffee when a notification popped up on his phone. Venmo. Your request to Nova for $28.4750 could not be completed. The recipient's bank has declined the transaction due to insufficient funds. Insufficient funds. Jax took a slow sip of his coffee. He knew Nova's paycheck from her PR firm was direct deposited into their joint account on the 15th and the 30th of each month. But he also knew that her salary, roughly $2,900 bi-weekly after taxes, was usually gone within days, spent on clothes, beauty treatments, and lunches he now knew he was no longer funding. She had been living on the float provided by his income. The float was gone. The aftershock started 10 minutes later. 10:15 a.m. Text from Nova. What is this Venmo request for almost $3,000? Is this a joke? Jax looked at the message. He let it sit for a full 2 minutes. He thought about Miss Okoro's advice. Communicate in writing. He typed his reply, short and devastatingly precise. 10:17 a.m. Text to Nova. You said we were roommates. Roommates split the bills. He could almost feel her shock through the phone. Her reply came back instantly, a string of messages tumbling one after another. 10:18 a.m. Text from Nova. What are you talking about? That was a stupid thing I said. You can't be serious. 10:18 a.m. Text from Nova. My Amex was just declined at Alfred Coffee. In front of everyone. What did you do? Jax waited another minute before replying. 10:19 a.m. Text to Nova. That's my card. I removed you as an authorized user. The response was a series of frantic, unanswered phone calls. He watched his screen light up with her name over and over. He let each one go to voicemail, just as his lawyer had instructed. The silence in his quiet bungalow was profound. Then the texts resumed, their tone shifting from confusion to outrage. 11:05 a.m. Text from Nova. This is insane, Jax. You can't just cut me off. This is our money. We are married. 11:30 a.m. Text from Nova. I'm getting emails. My Pilates payment was declined. My card is on file there. The one you just canceled. 1:45 p.m. Text from Nova. I just got home to grab my other cards and the internet is off. I have a deadline. What is happening? Jax did not reply. He forwarded a screenshot of the entire text exchange to Clara, Ms. Okoro's assistant, with the subject line, Project Roommate, Wednesday update. The climax of the strike came late that afternoon. At 4:52 p.m., his phone rang. It was an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered, his voice neutral. Hello? A flustered, angry voice he didn't recognize was on the other end. Yes, is this Jackson Carter? This is Megan from Nova's office. She's had some kind of financial emergency, her cards aren't working, and she's a complete mess. She needs a ride home. She said you're her husband. We're more like roommates now, Jax said, the words coming out cold and smooth as polished stone. He was using her own words, turning them into a shield. It was a callback, a rhetorical device he didn't know he possessed until this moment. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Excuse me? Megan finally stammered. Tell her to take an Uber, Jax said. She can put it on her own credit card if she has one. He hung up the phone. The strike was complete. The invisible structures were not just revealed, they were demolished. And Nova was standing in the rubble, finally forced to see the world that he had built and that she had taken for granted for what it was. The consequences cascaded through the rest of the week, a series of financial and emotional dominoes falling one after another. Nova's carefully curated life, built on the unstable foundation of Jax's quiet subsidy, crumbled with breathtaking speed. Jax, meanwhile, simply observed, documenting each new development as a neutral, dispassionate party. On Thursday morning, Jax woke up to 4 new voicemails, each one a different shade of desperation. He listened to them in his car, parked in the Kaiser employee lot before his shift, the audio playing through his Bluetooth speakers. He recorded the playback on a separate device, as Ms. Okoro had suggested. The first voicemail, left at 10:21 p.m. Wednesday night, was angry. Jax, what the hell is your problem? You embarrassed me in front of my colleagues. You left me stranded. You think this is funny? This isn't a game. This is my life. Call me back. Now. The second, from 1:14 a.m., was pleading. Jax, baby, please, I'm home now. The house is so dark and quiet. I don't understand what's happening. Let's just talk. I'm sorry for what I said. It was a stupid, stupid thing to say. I didn't mean it. Please just pick up the phone. The third, from 6:30 a.m. Thursday, was a portrait of pure panic. Oh my God, Jax, I just got an alert from my bank. My car payment was due today. It was supposed to come out of the joint account, but you didn't transfer your half of your paycheck. There wasn't enough money. It bounced. They're going to charge me a late fee. It's going to affect my credit. Jax, please, you have to fix this. I don't have the money. The fourth voicemail was the one that truly sealed her fate. It was just whimpering, the sound of a woman crying so hard she couldn't form words. It was the sound of entitlement colliding with reality. Jax listened to the entire 2-minute message without a flicker of emotion on his face. When it was over, he saved the audio files and emailed them to his lawyer's assistant with the subject line, Voicemails 10:26:23. That evening, he came home from his shift to find her waiting for him. She had been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy, her expensive makeup smudged. The house was dark, save for a single lamp in the living room. She had lit one of her $80 diptyque candles, a futile attempt to recreate a sense of normalcy that was already gone. Jax, she began, her voice trembling. We need to talk. I don't think we do, Nova, he said, keeping his distance, his work bag still slung over his shoulder. He was a man coming home to a stranger's house. Please, she begged, taking a step toward him. I'm sorry, okay? I was an idiot. I was wrong. I'll pay you back. I need you to turn the cards back on. I need you to put money in the account. We can go back to how it was. Go back to how it was. The phrase hung in the air between them. For her, how it was a life of effortless luxury. For him, how it was a life of quiet resentment and thankless labor. I don't think we can go back, Nova, he said, his voice quiet but firm. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small, crisp business card. I think it's best if we communicate through my attorney from now on. He held the card out to her. She stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. Adana Okoro, Esquires, family law specialist. Her face, already pale, went completely white. The blood seemed to drain from it, leaving her looking hollowed out, a ghost in her own life. She looked from the card back to his face, her eyes wide with a dawning, uncomprehending horror. This was not part of the script. Husbands didn't hire lawyers. Husbands apologized, and they paid. She didn't take the card. He placed it gently on the glass coffee table, next to the half-burned candle. She'll be in touch, he said. Then he walked past her, went into the guest room, and closed the door. The final blow landed on Friday, exactly 1 week after her fateful roommate comment. At 11 a.m., while Nova was in a glass-walled conference room at her Beverly Hills PR firm, trying to pretend her world wasn't imploding, a professionally dressed man walked into the office. He asked the receptionist for Nova Carter. He was a process server. In front of her boss and 3 of her colleagues, he handed her a thick manila envelope. You've been served, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. The cost for this public humiliation, $150, an expense Jax approved without hesitation when Ms. Okoro's office had suggested it. The documents inside laid out the new reality in stark legal terms. A petition for the dissolution of their marriage, a motion for exclusive use and possession of the Silver Lake bungalow, citing it as Jax's premarital separate property, a full financial disclosure including the spreadsheet Jax had created, now submitted as an official exhibit. The cascade was swift and brutal, cut off from Jax's income and credit. Nova's finances were a house of cards in a hurricane. She was legally required to vacate the Silver Lake property within 30 days. A quick search on Zillow revealed the stark reality: a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood she would consider even remotely acceptable, like West Hollywood or Santa Monica, started at $3,500 a month. With her $70,000 salary, which was just over $4,000 a month after taxes, she wouldn't even pass the credit check, especially now that her score had been dinged by the bounced car payment. She called Jax, crying, pleading, threatening. He never answered. The calls went to his lawyer. Within 2 weeks, she was forced to sell her things. The designer clothes she'd so proudly acquired were listed on Poshmark and The RealReal for fractions of their original price. The $2,400 Burberry trench coat sold for $650. The $3,500 YSL tote fetched $100. It wasn't nearly enough. She ended up finding a room for rent in a cramped 3-bedroom apartment in Los Feliz, shared with 2 aspiring actresses. The rent for her single 120-square-foot room was $400 a month. She had to sell her Honda Civic because she couldn't afford the insurance and registration, let alone the gas. Her new life was a world of shared bathrooms, bus schedules, and budget grocery stores. She was, finally and truly, a roommate. And she was discovering day by painful day that the price of admission was far higher than she had ever imagined. 1 year later, the sun was setting over Los Angeles, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and purple. Jackson Carter stood on a familiar trail in Griffith Park, the sprawling city glittering below him like a field of scattered diamonds. The air was cool and clean, a welcome contrast to the sterile, recycled air of the hospital. He was no longer just looking at the view. He was part of it, a man at peace in his own city. He took a deep breath, feeling the stretch in his lungs. Beside him, a young man named Marcus, a 22-year-old nursing student from Charles R. Drew University, was catching his breath. Jax had started a small, informal mentorship program for young black men entering the nursing field, a passion project that had given him a new sense of purpose. You see, the key to a good IV start, Jax was saying, picking up their earlier conversation, is confidence. The vein can feel it. If you hesitate, it'll roll on you every time. You have to be calm, precise, and decisive. Marcus nodded, his eyes wide with admiration. Like that time with the combative patient in ER Bay 3? Exactly like that, Jack smiled. Calm, precise, decisive. It works for veins, and it works for most other things in life too. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. It was, as Ms. Okoro had predicted, swift and relatively clean. Nova, on the advice of her own overwhelmed and underpaid legal aid attorney, had not fought. The evidence was too clear, the documentation too thorough. Jax's binder, project roommate, had become the cornerstone of the settlement. The final decree was simple and brutal in its fairness. Jax kept the Silver Lake bungalow, its value having appreciated to nearly $1.4 million, his premarital equity fully protected. He kept his entire Kaiser pension, his financial future secure. The joint bank account, which was nearly empty anyway, was split. The credit card debt, all of which was on his cards for her expenses, was deemed his responsibility. A final $7,800 bill he paid off in a single payment, closing the book on that chapter forever. Because their marriage was short, under 5 years, and because of the clear evidence of her earning potential and his premarital assets, the court awarded Nova temporary spousal support for only 18 months, a modest sum of $1,500 a month, just enough to keep her from being completely destitute but far from the lifestyle she had expected. Ms. Okoro's total legal bill had come to $17,450, an amount Jax paid from his savings without a second thought. It was the best money he had ever spent. He considered it an investment in his own peace. He had heard through the grapevine that Nova was struggling. She had lost the PR job. Her performance had suffered as her personal life unraveled. She was working as a hostess in a restaurant in Studio City, the irony of which was not lost on him. He felt a brief, fleeting pang of something, not pity, but a kind of detached sadness for the woman she could have been if her character had been as strong as her ambition. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text message from Sarah, a woman from his hiking group. They had met on this very trail a few months ago. She was a landscape architect, a woman who built beautiful things with her own 2 hands, a woman who understood that growth required good soil and hard work. Sarah: "That sunset is incredible. See you at the trailhead Saturday? 8 a.m.? Sharp." Jack smiled, a real, unforced smile that reached his eyes. He typed back his reply. Jax: "Wouldn't miss it. I'll bring the coffee." He put his phone away and turned his attention back to the city, to the endless web of lights. He had learned a hard lesson, but a valuable one. He had learned that a home is more than a structure of wood and glass, and a marriage is more than a shared address. They are partnerships, built on the invisible beams of mutual respect, shared effort, and honest communication. When those beams crumble, the whole structure is compromised, becoming nothing more than a property with bills to be split. True wealth wasn't in the $80 candles or the $2,400 coats. It was in the quiet satisfaction of a job well done, the deep peace of a walk at sunset, the easy camaraderie of a new friend, and the freedom to build a life on his own solid, dependable terms. He had been a roommate in his own home, a financial provider for a partnership that didn't exist. Now he was just Jax. And for the first time in a long time, that was more than enough. Some might say what Jax did was cold, but was it colder than being told your love and support are equivalent to a rental agreement? Let us know in the comments what you think. Is accountability a form of cruelty, or is it the only true path to justice? Remember to subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories about finding strength in the face of betrayal. The most valuable asset you can own is your own self-worth.